Good Tuesday to you again, everybody in COM 651. I was going to say 7 something. Welcome again to week 5 and the review of week 4. All right. So it's been about 5 or 10 minutes since I made the last video, so I'm still sipping water. A little bit of a sore throat, so if I sound scratchy, it's because I am. Okay. So last week, week 4. I have for you now, I think, I'm, all of weeks 1, 2, and 3 graded, all of your phases 1 and 2 graded, and I will finish grading week 4 this week, probably by Wednesday. So you will have the feedback from me that you're looking for. But let me give you some feedback based on weeks 1, 2, and 3, because that's like a third, nearly a half of the course. Okay. As you've heard me say in other videos, right? In terms of how you approach these assignments, imagine you're the PR consultant, you're the PR company. In the case of the semester project. So you can write WRA in that vein. So if that it's a little role play. If that helps you sort of get your head in the game, go ahead and write that way, right? And cite whatever the 3 or principles. Like I'm thinking from last week, the 3 principles of communication for effective public relations from Hayes, as you advise Vivek. All right. Now I will say that I will post again. And I think I might even I will go back and post the writing is rewriting, the exercise in writing is rewriting, with examples from and I'm pulling these things at random from the papers that you're turning in, and give everyone a chance to rewrite, the sentences or the paragraph, looking for ways to make them clearer, straightforward, and more impactful, because that's what we're aiming at, especially in public relations, and especially as we look into this week 5, crisis communication. Because when there is a crisis, people are on edge, right? And when communication is not clear, rightly or wrongly, people assume that, especially in the instances in which when there are authority figures or institutions of authority, police, government, and when they're not clear in their communication, rightly or wrongly, people assume that they're trying to hide something, they're trying to distract from something, they're trying to obfuscate about something. And that may not be the case. What often happens is you have the initial anxiety in the public over whatever the crisis is. And then now, because of bad communication in the crisis communication, you have additional anxiety in which individuals or groups of individuals are making accusations about, misdirection and obfuscation, which may not be the case. It may be just poor communication. Okay. So I will post, I'll go back and post weeks 2, week 3, pulling sentences and paragraphs from, and I'm not picking on anybody, okay, from just the papers that are there, and ask you to rewrite them with an eye for clarity and give you something like 10 points. All right. So we're going to do that because writing is rewriting. Okay. Let me give you some feedback from the work that you've been turning in. Were weeks 1 through 3. So going ahead for these remaining weeks, be more specific in what you recommend. Okay. So if I'm asking you what would you recommend to Vivek Ramaswamy? Be specific, right? Don't simply write. And I'm going to read from some of your papers here. And this it's just us in here, right? When we're all here to support each other, not to knock each other over the head. So when I read something, I use it as an example of what I'm talking about. When I say, do more of this, do less of that. I don't use it as an example to say, look what this person's doing. And by the way, I want to tell each and every one of you, in terms of writing missteps and just flat out faux pas, you get in line, baby, because that starts right here. I have a long and glorious history of really cranking out some crap and then just absolute nonsense. Okay, this is something that happens to all of us as writers. Okay, so be more specific. Let me give you an example. This person writes, in looking at the 3 recommendations for effective communication in public relations. Additionally, adding favorable opinions of bipartisan individuals. Okay, and this will spill over into another point, but put a pin in that. Favorable opinions of bipartisan individuals, where possible, will be helpful to the campaign's effectiveness. These opinions should be generated through interviews and published on YouTube and other social media sites. Quotes from these individuals should also be recorded and included in news and blog articles and Facebook and Instagram posts and on Twitter. Okay, which, by the way, and you need to this is a little thing, but Twitter isn't Twitter. Twitter is X. Okay, we'll go back to this in specificity, but I want you to keep this in mind, because whether it's crisis communication or just communication, this needs to be foremost in your mind always as the communicator. When, as communicators, we make mistakes, and whether they are structural, so they're grammatical mistakes, or they're syntax, as we use words and word combinations that just go, that just sounds weird. That doesn't sound right to me. The effect of that is you change the subject in the minds of your listeners. What you want them, the subject that you want them focused on, is whatever the subject is of your communication. If you're not careful about catching your mistakes, or you're not careful about awkward and strange phrasings, they're going to start thinking about something else. And can you guess what that something else is? And it's happened to me. Can you guess what that something else is? Well, if you can't, I'm going to tell you. That something else is this institution, because they don't see you as the communicator. This institution doesn't know what the heck it's talking about. And then it goes from there. They're stupid. They're trying to hide something. They really don't understand the situation. How is it that they have the right to tell us what's going on when they don't understand it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It changes the subject. It changes the thought track in the mind of the listener. Don't do that. And never, never, never underestimate your audience's ability to lose track of what it is you want them to focus on. And then never overestimate your ability to get them back on track. People are tremendously distractible. And once they're off, most of the time they're gone. Okay? So be specific about what you're writing and what you're saying. So, the second point that I have for you is to reread and rewrite. I'll give you an example of that, but let's go back to this example for specificity. Additionally, adding favorable opinions of bipartisan individuals. What's a bipartisan individual? What does it mean, bipartisan? Bipartisan means individuals from each political party, people from each political party, representatives from each political party. You can't have an individual that's bipartisan. All right, so be careful. Where possible, will be helpful to the campaign's effectiveness. These opinions, what opinions? Whose opinions? Should be gathered through interviews and published on YouTube. Okay, great. Why? And we're talking specifically to Vivek. Why should they be published on YouTube? Is the watchers, the audience, the core key public that Vivek Ramaswamy needs to attract? Are they the core audience for YouTube? How do you know? And you might be thinking, geez, these are supposed to be just weekly assignments. You're asking us to add a whole lot in. Not really, because getting the information to give the specifics, like what leaders, bipartisan, I'm assuming the writer means political leaders, okay? What leaders, what opinions, and what platforms, these are a couple of Google searches away. This is not hours and hours worth of work. You could find just a couple of very quick queries. What's on the bell curve here, what's the core demographic that watches YouTube? Who are they? What's their gender? What's their age? What's their income? All of this information is readily available to you. Who does Vivek need to win the nomination? Again, looking on the bell curve, who constitutes the core demographic that decides primary elections? What's their gender for Republican candidates? Because we're talking about this. What's their gender? What's their age? What region of the country do they live in? You can find this out. Clickety clack. I need you to be more specific because you are the PR representative. Okay, that's the first point. Secondly, the second item, and I think, if I were putting these in terms of importance, this one would go first, and then the specificity would go second. Everybody, you've got to reread and rewrite what you're doing, because again, back to how it changes what the reader is thinking. It changes the subject. What's the topic? What are we doing here? In their mind, consider the following sentence. Vivek Ramaswamy is quickly spreading Vivek Ramaswamy is a quickly spreading Republican presidential candidate. Okay. Does that sound weird to anybody else but me? A quickly spreading republic, a quickly spreading republic presidential candidate. Okay, no. Quickly spreading might be COVID. Quickly spreading might be something you spilled on the counter. That's a transitive. Quickly spreading. Spreading is a transitive verb. Quickly modifies the verb. All right. Reread and rewrite. Be more conscientious about what you're writing. And in that vein, you're overwriting. I would say 80 to 90% of you. Just simplify, just straightforward, plain, straight English. Okay, here, consider this sentence. Leaders of Latin American nations are torn about Vivek's declarations, appreciating overdue attention on the region from a U.S. political influencer, but hesitant about possible implications of U.S. intervention into their political affairs. Ouch. Is there a simpler way that we can say that? Leaders of Latin America welcome U.S. political involvement, but are concerned about interference. I mean, can we just reduce the amount of verbiage, first and foremost in there? And in addition to that, get rid of some of the awkward phrasings. I don't know what a U.S. political influencer is. Do you mean candidate? President? Potential? Okay. Reread, rewrite, simplify, specify. These are the areas I want you to focus on going ahead with the remainder of these assignments and your group report. Okay. I know writing is a difficult task, and it is it's interesting because as a skill, it's not intuitive to our mind. It's not like walking, you know, putting food into our mouths. I mean, and you go, oh, that's kind of a weird example. Why would you use that? Well, because when we're born, there is a wired relationship between our hand and our mouth. I mean, it's one of the first things we figure out in terms of spatial relationship of the self. In fact, the greatest point of focus for our eyes is at about 3 feet, which happens to be about the length of our hand. That's hardwired. The desire and the capacity to walk is hardwired into us. It's not the case with writing. There's some really fascinating work and research that's been done on this, how writing changes how we think. And conversely, you have to change how you think. And when we mean change how we think, we're talking about as communicators when you write. We cannot write as we speak. Why? Because when I'm communicating to you, even though I'm you're not watching this in real time. All right, this is recorded. So you are now watching the past when you're watching this video. But when I speak to you, I'm speaking, and although you might be watching this on your phone or on a computer, whether it's laptop or desktop. All right, there's a three-dimensional quality to this space, although it's really just 2 dimensions, X and Y. All right, because you can see the books behind me, you see this water bottle. There's some depth. All right, so whether I'm sitting in front of you in person or it's a video, when we're communicating in a three-dimensional space, there are so many elements of the communication at our disposal that we can use to bring meaning. There's hand gestures. There's facial expressions. There's voice in terms of volume, inflection. There's pause by way of delivery. The majority of the communication, that is the meaning of what you're saying, doesn't come through the words. But when you pull yourself out of that three-dimensional space as a communicator, when you write, this is truly two-dimensional. And I mean, the X and the Y axis, because you can't go into the page. There's no even illusion of three-dimensional. All of those additional communication, and we're going to use the academic term here, modalities, gone. So you cannot think about how it is that you're going to communicate when you're speaking. It's when you're writing. You must develop the discipline and get your mind engaged, saying, all right, I'm writing now. And so you need to develop the skill set to deliver emphasis on this flat two-dimensional plane, to deliver interest, like say, hey, focus here on this flat two-dimensional plane. There's some really interesting work within the field of communication about how writing changes how we think, and conversely, how we must change how we think when we write. Walter Ong, O-N-G, is one of the leading, or was, God rest his soul, one of the leading scholars on the difference between how the mind works, the communication process works between orality, there's spoken word, and literacy, written word. Marshall McLuhan also wrote a lot about this. So if this is an area that interests you, and it does me quite a bit, those are 2 foundational thinkers and writers to start with. Okay? So I understand. This is hard. This is challenging. And that's okay. I remember when I was an undergraduate, all full of spit and vinegar. And I've loved languages my whole life. I mean, even when I was a kid and I didn't know it, I loved making sounds and imitating the sounds of other things and people, accents. So when I got out of elementary school, I just I couldn't get enough language courses because I studied Spanish and I studied French. And then I went on to college to study French and Italian and German. And then for my own purposes, Arabic and Swahili, love languages. But I remember when I was an undergraduate, all full of spit and vinegar. And I was in one of my French professor's offices during office hours. And I don't remember the specifics of what my issue was. I was complaining about the difficulty of some verb tense or something. And she tried, to her credit, she had tried to explain it to me. And I just kept saying, yeah, but I don't get it. I don't get it. And finally, she slammed her hand down on her desk and she said, she was a very, very gentle person. She was a Quaker. But she said, doggone it, Jeff. Sometimes learning hurts because it's a struggle. And that's just the way it is. So it's okay. It's okay if you're, having to lean into this and you go, oh, geez, I thought that I had done this and I'd done that. It's all right. If you do not understand why it is I'm saying what I'm saying in the feedback to your papers, call me. For those of you that have spent time on the phone with me, I hope, post this in the board, your experience. I hope that you'll find that it was worth your while, that I'll explain, what it is that I'm talking about and come to you with solutions. I used to, before I got into, well, I shouldn't say that because I was going to say before I got into higher education, but I was already in higher education. But for a number of years, I was a principal of a Christian school. And then I was one of the directors of a school district. And I used to tell my teachers and then principals that worked under me, my door is open all the time for you if you have an issue. Come on in. I'm telling you the same thing. My office hours are open all the time for you. All right. And you're bringing a problem to me. But the very next thing that we're going to do after we air out the problem is we're going to find a solution. Because I don't know about you, but the stack on my desk does not need another problem. I got that basket is full, man. I got plenty. All right. So for those of you who spent time with me during my office hours, I hope you will pass on. And I hope, by the way, that this is your experience, that sitting down and talking about the feedback that you're getting is instructive, and it's clarifying, and it's helpful, because that's why we're here. Okay. All right, everybody. It's about 20 something minutes, and that's all the time that I give for these. Have a wonderful and blessed week. Right? I am thinking about you. I'm praying for you. And if you have any questions, I'm here for you. Get in touch with me. And I can't guarantee how you'll think, but I will guarantee you that I will do everything in my power to make what it is and why it is we're doing in this class as absolutely clear and beneficial as possible. All right. That's my promise to you. Okay, everybody. Great week. And I will see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.